Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the eviction notice taped to her front door. 3 months of unpaid rent. Impossible. She'd paid every month, hadn't she? Her mind raced as she tore the paper down, stumbling into her apartment where bills lay scattered across the kitchen table: electricity, water, credit card statements for purchases she'd never made. Her phone buzzed with another debt collector's call. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Just 6 months ago, Sarah's life had been perfect. She ran a successful marketing consultancy from home. Her clients loved her work, and her apartment in the heart of the city was her sanctuary. But managing everything alone had become exhausting. That's when Grace entered her life. Grace had come highly recommended by Sarah's neighbor. A soft-spoken woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and impeccable references, she seemed like the answer to Sarah's prayers. During the interview, Grace sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, speaking about her experience with other families and her dream of saving enough money to open a small catering business. "I just want honest work, ma'am," Grace had said, her voice warm and sincere. "I'll take care of your home like it's my own." Sarah had hired her on the spot. Those first few weeks felt like a dream. Sarah would wake up to find her apartment spotless, her laundry folded, meals prepped in the refrigerator. Grace handled everything with quiet efficiency, always greeting Sarah with a gentle smile. When Sarah worked late into the night on client presentations, Grace would bring her tea without being asked. "You work too hard, Miss Sarah," Grace would say softly. "You need to rest." Sarah had laughed it off, grateful to have someone who cared. She began to trust Grace completely, giving her keys to the apartment, access to run errands, even her credit card to handle household shopping. Grace had become more than an employee. She felt like family. But then came the small things. Sarah noticed her favorite earrings had disappeared from her jewelry box. When she asked Grace about them, the maid's eyes widened with concern. "Oh no, Miss Sarah, I haven't seen them. Maybe you left them at the office?" Grace had suggested, her voice filled with such genuine worry that Sarah felt guilty for even asking. Then it was $20 missing from her wallet. Then 50. Sarah tried to convince herself she was misremembering, that she'd spent the money and forgotten. Work had been stressful lately, and she was juggling multiple projects. Maybe she was just being paranoid. One evening, Sarah came home early to find Grace on the phone in the living room, speaking in hushed tones. When Grace saw her, she quickly ended the call, her smile bright, but her eyes flickering with something Sarah couldn't quite read. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked casually, setting down her bag. "Oh yes, ma'am. Just talking to my sister," Grace replied quickly, already moving toward the kitchen. "Let me warm up your dinner." Sarah wanted to believe her. She needed to believe her. But the strange occurrences multiplied. Important emails vanished from her inbox. A client complained about an unprofessional response Sarah had supposedly sent, except Sarah had never written it. Her bank sent notifications about her address being changed. When she called to verify, they confirmed someone had called claiming to be her, providing all the correct security information. "How is that possible?" Sarah demanded, her heart pounding. The bank representative's voice was apologetic but firm. "The caller had all your personal details, ma'am. We had no reason to doubt it was you." That night, Sarah confronted Grace as gently as she could manage. They sat at the kitchen table, Sarah's stomach churning with anxiety. "Grace, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me," Sarah began, watching the maid's face carefully. "Have you noticed anything unusual? Anyone accessing my mail or my computer?" Grace's expression shifted to one of hurt confusion. "Miss Sarah, what are you saying? You think I would do something like that?" "I'm not accusing you," Sarah said quickly, though doubt gnawed at her insides. "I'm just trying to understand what's happening. Things have been disappearing. My accounts have been tampered with. I would never." Grace's voice broke, tears welling in her eyes. "I've done everything for you, Miss Sarah. I've cleaned, I've cooked, I've taken care of this home like you asked. And now you think I'm some kind of thief." The tears looked real. The pain in Grace's voice sounded genuine. Sarah felt her resolve crumbling. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered, reaching out to touch Grace's hand. I'm just stressed. Forget I said anything. Grace sniffled, wiping her eyes. It's okay, Miss Sarah. I understand. You're under so much pressure. Maybe you should rest more. But Sarah couldn't rest. Something in her gut screamed that things weren't right. She started paying closer attention, watching Grace when the maid didn't know she was being observed. She noticed how Grace would slip into her bedroom when she thought Sarah was in the shower. How she'd linger by Sarah's desk when important documents were left out. How her phone was always nearby, always buzzing with messages. One afternoon, Sarah pretended to leave for a client meeting but doubled back, parking her car down the street and slipping back into the building. She crept into her apartment, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure Grace would hear it. From the hallway, she heard Grace's voice, confident and cold, nothing like the soft-spoken woman she knew. Yes, I have all the information, Grace was saying into her phone. Social security number, mother's maiden name, everything. The credit cards should arrive by next week. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. She's too trusting, too busy to notice. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself against the wall, listening, as her entire world collapsed around her. I told you this one would be easy, Grace continued, laughing. Actually laughing. She handed me everything on a silver platter. Keys, passwords, access to her files. It's almost too simple. By the time she figures it out, I'll have enough to disappear. Sarah's vision blurred with tears of rage and betrayal. This woman she'd welcomed into her home, whom she'd treated like family, had been systematically destroying her life. Every kindness had been manipulation. Every smile had been a lie. She stumbled backward, her phone clutched in her shaking hand. She needed proof. She needed evidence that would stand up in court. Forcing herself to breathe quietly, she activated her phone's recording feature and crept closer to the living room. The best part, Grace was saying now, her voice dripping with satisfaction. She actually apologized to me when she asked if I was stealing. Can you believe it? I cried a little, played the hurt victim, and she fell for it completely. These people are all the same, so guilty about having help that they can't imagine we might actually be smarter than them. Sarah recorded everything. Every cruel word, every admission of fraud, every detail of Grace's scheme. When Grace finally ended the call, Sarah quietly left the apartment again, her mind racing with plans. Over the next 2 days, Sarah gathered evidence while pretending everything was normal. She smiled at Grace, thanked her for dinner, acted like the trusting fool Grace believed her to be. But behind the scenes, she was building her case. She contacted her bank, her credit card companies, pulled records of every transaction Grace had made in her name. She hired a private investigator who discovered Grace had done this before 3 other employers in the past 5 years, each left financially devastated while Grace moved on to her next victim. The detective found the fake credit cards Grace had ordered using Sarah's identity. Applications for loans in Sarah's name. Even a lease for an apartment across town where Grace had been living a second life, furnished with items stolen from Sarah's home and purchased with Sarah's money. When Sarah finally had everything she needed, she called the police. 2 officers arrived at her apartment on a Thursday afternoon while Grace was preparing dinner, humming contentedly to herself in the kitchen. Grace Martinez? The taller officer asked as Grace emerged from the kitchen, her face going pale. Yes. Grace's voice was small, uncertain. She looked at Sarah, confusion flickering across her features. Miss Sarah, what's happening? You're under arrest for identity theft, fraud, and embezzlement, the officer continued, pulling out handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Grace's mask finally cracked. The kind, gentle maid disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. Her eyes locked on Sarah with pure hatred. You stupid woman, Grace hissed as the officer cuffed her hands behind her back. You were supposed to be easy. You were supposed to just let it happen. I trusted you, Sarah said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. I welcomed you into my home. I treated you with respect and kindness. And you repaid me by trying to steal my entire life. Grace laughed bitterly. Your life? You don't even appreciate what you have. You sit in this apartment, working on your little computer, completely oblivious to the real world. You deserved this. No one deserves to be betrayed, Sarah replied. But everyone deserves to face the consequences of their actions. As the officers led Grace away, she screamed threats and insults, her true nature fully exposed. Neighbors peered out of their doors, watching the scene unfold. The woman who had smiled so sweetly at everyone in the building was revealed as nothing more than a predator. The legal process moved quickly once the evidence was presented. Grace's previous victims came forward, their stories heartbreakingly similar to Sarah's. The prosecutor called it one of the most extensive identity theft rings she'd ever seen. Grace had stolen over $200,000 from her victims combined, leaving financial and emotional devastation in her wake. In court, Grace showed no remorse. She sat stone-faced as victim after victim testified about the damage she'd caused. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she looked directly at the woman who had almost destroyed her life. "You didn't just steal my money or my identity," Sarah said, her voice clear and strong. "You stole my ability to trust. You made me question my own judgment, my own instincts. You violated the sanctuary of my home and the safety I felt in my own life. But you didn't break me. You made me stronger. And now you'll face the consequences of every choice you made." Grace was sentenced to 8 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to all her victims. As the judge read the sentence, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Justice, finally. Rebuilding took time. Sarah spent months working with credit agencies to repair the damage to her finances and her credit score. She attended therapy to process the betrayal and learn to trust again. The apartment felt different now, tainted by memories of Grace's deception. So Sarah eventually moved to a new place, a fresh start. But she didn't let the experience make her bitter. Instead, she became an advocate for other victims of identity theft, sharing her story to help others recognize the warning signs. She learned to trust her instincts, to never ignore that small voice that whispers when something isn't right. Sometimes, late at night, Sarah thinks about Grace and wonders if she ever feels remorse. Probably not. People like that rarely do. But Sarah has found peace in knowing that karma, however slowly it moves, eventually catches up to everyone. The maid who tried to take her life is now serving time, while Sarah has reclaimed everything that was stolen, and more. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted? And if you found value in this story, give it a like. Your support helps us share more stories that matter. Remember, trust your instincts. They're usually right.